They were icons, the brightest black stars to ever grace the stage and screen. Their talent was unmatched, their presence unforgettable. But behind the flashing lights and roaring applause lurked a darker truth. With fame came unbearable pressure, and for many, that pressure led them down a dangerous path of addiction and temptation. Their lives, once filled with promise and brilliance, came to sudden and heartbreaking ends, silencing voices that were never meant to fade. In today's video, we'll uncover the emotional and devastating stories of 21 black celebrities whose lives were tragically cut short by drug overdoses. These were legends in their prime, artists who gave us everything, until addiction took it all away. Their deaths left behind not just silence, but a deep, lingering grief in the hearts of fans around the world. Join us as we honor their legacy and confront the painful realities behind their tragic final chapters. Prince, the silent fall of a musical god. Prince, the electrifying force who redefined music in the 80s, the genius behind Purple Rain, the soul of funk, pop, and rebellion, was more than an icon. He was a living symphony, a beacon of pride for the black community, and a man whose talent seemed otherworldly. But behind the dazzling lights and high heels was a man silently fighting pain. A man whose final moment would come not on stage, but in an elevator, cold, quiet, and alone. April 21, 2016. The world stood still. At his legendary Paisley Park estate, the elevator doors slid open to reveal a chilling sight. Prince, lifeless on the floor, his skin pale, his hand clenched tight over his chest as if he just battled an invisible demon. The air was thick with silence. No one saw it happen. No one was there to hear his final breath. But the clues he left behind painted a haunting picture. Years of jaw-dropping performances had ravaged his body. The flips, the splits, the iconic spins and high heels, they came at a brutal cost. His hips and knees screamed in pain. Doctors urged him to undergo surgery, but as a devout Jehovah's Witness, he refused the blood transfusion the operation required. Instead, he leaned on painkillers, strong, silent companions that helped him endure the agony. Until they didn't. That morning, Prince wasn't feeling well. He reached for the pills he always carried, the ones that dulled the pain just enough to keep him going. But something was different this time. His chest tightened. His breath grew shallow. His body, usually so alive, began to fade. And there, inside the elevator, the very symbol of going up or down, he collapsed. When they found him, it was too late. The purple flame had gone out. The autopsy revealed the cruel truth. Prince had unknowingly taken a counterfeit pill laced with fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 100 times more powerful than morphine. A dose so lethal, it didn't give him a chance. No one knows if he realized what he was swallowing. But what we do know is this. It was a death sentence hidden in plain sight. Prince didn't die in a blaze of glory on stage. He died quietly, tragically, a victim not just of pain, but of a broken system, a deadly drug, and perhaps his own refusal to rest. The world lost more than a star that day. We lost a genius, a rebel, a spirit too rare to be replaced. What remains is his music, and the haunting echo of a life that burned too brightly, too briefly. David Ruffin, the voice that shook the world, silenced in solitude. David Ruffin, a name once synonymous with soul, passion, and the golden age of Motown, died not on a stage or in the arms of loved ones, but alone, abandoned in a cold hospital lobby. He was the voice of the Temptations, the powerhouse behind My Girl, a song that became the heartbeat of a generation. His raspy, velvet-rich vocals weren't just heard, they were felt. David was born to shine, to echo through eternity. But fame, as always, came at a price. After leaving the Temptations in 1968, David's solo dreams never reached the heights he hoped for. With each passing year, disappointment carved deeper into his soul. And when the music faded, the silence was filled with cocaine. A two-decade battle with addiction became his quiet war, one that slowly devoured the man behind the voice. Then came May 31, 1991. After a small, low-key gig, David found himself in a hazy apartment, surrounded by cigarette smoke, empty bottles, and the ghosts of better days. He took one more hit, just one, and his body betrayed him. His heart raced, his chest tightened, his limbs shook. He was overdosing. The voice that once moved millions now couldn't even cry for help. Panic filled the room. Nobody called 911. Instead, they dragged him to a car and sped toward a hospital, not out of care, but desperation. When they arrived, they barely stopped. Two men carried David inside, dropped him in the ER lobby, and vanished into the night like shadows. No name, no explanation, no goodbye. By the time medical staff discovered him, David Ruffin, the soulful king of Motown, was already gone. It wasn't just the drugs that killed him. It was the loneliness, the betrayal, the final, haunting irony of a man who once sang about love being left to die in silence. David Ruffin's voice may have made the world feel less alone, but in the end, no one was there for him. Phyllis Hyman, the voice that faded in silence. Phyllis Hyman wasn't just a soul and R&B powerhouse. She was elegance, strength, and vulnerability wrapped in velvet vocals. Her voice could stop time, yet behind the spotlight was a woman drowning in silence, carrying wounds the world never saw. On June 30th, 1995, just hours before she was set to take the stage, Phyllis was found lifeless in her apartment, surrounded by soft silk, an empty wine bottle, and a partially used bottle of pills. To fans, friends, and family, it was unthinkable. Only hours earlier, she was laughing, glowing, hiding the storm behind her smile. That same day, a phone call changed everything. Expecting comfort, she answered with hope. Instead, the voice on the other end delivered a final blow. "Phyllis, it's over. Don't call me again." The line went dead, and so, it seems, did her last thread of strength. Rather than rehearse, she sat quietly with her memories, her heartbreak, and a glass of wine. Days later, a handwritten letter was found beside her, pages filled with pain, isolation, and a lifetime of silent suffering. Despite fame and success, Phyllis felt unseen, unheard, lost beneath the weight of emotional scars no stage could heal. Her death wasn't just a loss. It was the silencing of a soul too heavy with sorrow to keep singing. A dazzling star extinguished far too soon. Rick James, the king of funk and the night the music died. Rick James wasn't just a funk icon. He was a revolution wrapped in rhinestones and rebellion. With hits like Super Freak and Give It To Me Baby, he redefined an entire era, setting the world on fire with raw energy, wild charisma, and music that pulsed through the soul. But behind the glitter and groove was a man carrying the weight of fame, pain, and demons that never let go. By 2004, Rick was still chasing the music, always creating, always dreaming. On the night of August 5th, after long hours in the studio pouring his soul into a new project, he returned to his room seeking rest. But like so many nights before, he leaned on old habits to quiet the pain and keep the fire burning. These weren't just vices. They were scars from a lifetime of excess, forged in the fast lane of the music industry where pleasure often masked pain. There was a time when Rick James burned through fortunes in a week, money, drugs, and decadence feeding the machine behind the curtain. The party never stopped, but neither did the damage. Years of living full throttle had taken their toll, and his body bore the cost of every high, every crash, every sleepless night. Pain became a constant companion, and pills became the only relief. But Rick never truly escaped the world that once crowned him king. Those old routines clung to him like shadows, quiet, familiar, dangerous. And on that final night, the rhythm stopped. He collapsed alone, in a room filled with memories, music, and silence. By the time his assistant found him the next morning, it was too late. The vibrant, booming energy that had once lit up arenas was gone. The autopsy revealed a haunting truth: 9 different substances in his system. It wasn't just one thing. It was everything. A life lived without breaks finally ran out of road. Rick James died as funk was aching for a revival, as if the genre itself had been waiting for his return. He never got to finish his final song, but what he gave the world will never fade. His voice, his edge, his fire, they live on in every bass line that thumps, every track that dares to break the rules. Rick James didn't just make music. He was music. And though the man is gone, the funk will never die. Shock G, the genius who danced with demons. Gregory Edward Jacobs, the world knew him as Shock G. But he wasn't just a rapper. He was a musical alchemist, a visionary who reshaped hip-hop with wit, funk, and fearless creativity. As the eccentric frontman of Digital Underground, he gifted us the Humpty Dance, a timeless anthem that turned heads and moved hearts. His artistry was bold, bizarre, and brilliant. But behind the playful persona and iconic nose disguise was a man fighting battles far beyond the stage. As the golden glow of old-school rap began to fade, so did the spotlight that once embraced Shock G. The fame quieted, the crowds thinned, and in that silence, darker companions crept in: addiction, loneliness, and memories that haunted more than they healed. On the night of April 21, 2021, alone in a Tampa hotel room, Shock G fell back into the arms of old habits. Maybe he was chasing peace, maybe just a moment of escape. But this time, his body couldn't keep up. He mixed substances that once gave him fuel, but now they betrayed him. His heartbeat faltered. Breathing became a struggle. And then, everything stopped. The morning brought no encore. When hotel staff checked in, they found him unresponsive. Gone. The official cause: an accidental overdose. Respiratory failure. But no report could ever capture the void he left behind. Shock G's death sent a tremor through the hip-hop world. Fans and fellow artists mourned not just the man, but the genius, the innovator, the soulful clown who dared to be different. He wasn't done creating: unfinished tracks, unrealized visions, all waiting for his return. But fate had closed the curtain. And yet, maybe somewhere beyond this world, Shock G is still vibing, free from pain, far from addiction, laying down verses in a place where the beat never dies and the music plays on forever. Frankie Lyman, the boy who sang too soon and died too young. Frankie Lyman was more than just a teenage heartthrob. He was a musical miracle. At only 13 years old, his angelic voice and infectious energy turned "Why Do Fools Fall in Love?" into a national sensation, catapulting him and his group, the Teenagers, into instant stardom. He became the face of a generation, a symbol of youth, charm, and limitless promise. But fame, when it arrives too early, rarely leaves room to grow. As Frankie aged, his voice deepened and the spotlight dimmed. What once brought him applause now brought anxiety, rejection, and the harsh realization that fame doesn't forgive the passage of time. Struggling to stay relevant, Frankie fell into the arms of heroin, a deadly seduction that haunted him for years. Despite repeated attempts to sober up, the addiction always found its way back in. By February 26, 1968, 25-year-old Frankie had returned to his grandmother's home in Harlem, the place where his dreams were born. This time, he carried something precious: hope. A new record deal, a clean slate, and a real shot at redemption were finally within reach. The boy wonder was ready to rise again. But that night, instead of choosing a new beginning, Frankie made one last, tragic mistake. Maybe he thought he had it under control. Maybe he just needed one more escape. But his body, worn down from years of damage, couldn't take it. The next morning, his family found him lying lifeless on the floor, silent, still, and gone. The news sent a wave of heartbreak through fans who had once danced to his voice. Frankie Lyman, the prodigy who once lit up the charts and the hearts of millions, died at 25, just as life was giving him a second chance. His death was more than a tragedy. It was a cruel reminder of how fame can build you up just to tear you apart. Frankie should have soared longer. He should have grown into the legend he was born to be. But instead, he became a cautionary tale, another bright light snuffed out too soon by the dark side of stardom. Donny Hathaway, a soul drenched in genius and tragedy. Donny Hathaway, a name that once echoed through the halls of soul music with unmatched depth and beauty, was more than a singer. He was a vessel of raw emotion, a storyteller whose voice could mend hearts and stir souls. Classics like A Song for You and Where Is the Love weren't just hits, they were testaments to a talent so rare, it seemed otherworldly. At his peak in the 1970s, Donny stood among giants, hailed as one of the greatest voices of his generation. But behind that golden voice was a man in quiet agony. Donny Hathaway lived with a torment few could understand, a mind haunted by schizophrenia, and a heart burdened by constant fear. Paranoia gripped him like a vice. He believed people were out to control him, that wires had been planted in his brain, that unseen forces were watching his every move. His brilliance was intertwined with madness, and the lines between reality and illusion were always blurred. On the night of January 13, 1979, Donny checked into the Essex House Hotel in New York. He was working with Roberta Flack on what many hoped would be a triumphant comeback. But that night would not mark a return, it would mark the end. Alone in his hotel room, Donny battled the demons that never let him rest. Medication had dulled the symptoms but never silenced them. That evening, his mind, fractured, tormented, exhausted, could bear no more. In a moment of unbearable desperation, he stepped from the 15th floor window into the icy night. The next morning, the world woke to heartbreak. One of the purest voices in music was gone. He was just 33. Donny Hathaway didn't just leave behind songs. He left behind a legacy of genius, pain, and a haunting reminder that even the brightest stars can be fighting battles no one sees. He didn't die in the spotlight, surrounded by applause. He died in silence, on a lonely sidewalk in New York, a soul undone by the weight of his own mind. Ike Turner, a lonely end to a tumultuous legend. Ike Turner, the man who helped spark rock and roll into existence, didn't die with a roar, but with a whisper. A true pioneer, Ike carved his name into music history with Rocket 88, widely considered one of the first true rock records. His talent was undeniable, his influence immeasurable. But behind the brilliance was chaos, addiction, violence, and controversy that clung to him like shadows, darkening the legacy he fought so hard to build. On the morning of December 12, 2007, inside his quiet home in San Marcos, California, Ike sat slumped in his favorite chair, silent, still, and alone. In the days before his death, he had confided in his assistant that he felt something strange in the air, an unshakable sense that something was coming. He couldn't explain it, but it lingered, heavy, foreboding. That morning, as his assistant entered the room to go over his schedule, she sensed it too. Something was off. Ike sat peacefully, one hand resting in his lap, as if lost in a nap. But as she moved closer, the truth hit. He was gone. Quietly. Without warning. Without fanfare. Later, the cause was revealed, long-term complications from years of drug abuse. The same demons that once fueled his downfall had finally claimed him. Ike Turner's death didn't make headlines like his scandals did. It was quiet, lonely, but deeply symbolic. In that silence, in that still room, the curtain closed on a life of brilliance and brokenness. Despite everything, the rage, the regrets, the redemption that never fully came, Ike left behind a legacy that reshaped music forever. And in the solitude of his own home, he took his final bow, leaving behind echoes of genius and ghosts of a life lived too fast. Jimi Hendrix, the fatal night that silenced a legend. Jimi Hendrix wasn't just a guitarist, he was a force of nature. The sound of Purple Haze and Voodoo Child didn't just change rock music. They exploded it, ripping open the boundaries of sound, race, and rebellion. He lit the stage on fire with every performance, a cosmic presence that felt too wild to be contained. But behind the screaming amps and psychedelic lights was a man fighting for peace in a world that never gave him any. On the night of September 17, 1970, Jimi shared a quiet evening with his girlfriend, Monica Danman, at the Samarkand Hotel in London. They talked, played music, drank wine. A rare moment of calm for a man constantly on the run from fame, pressure, and his own demons. But by morning, that calm had shattered. Monica awoke to find Jimi unresponsive, gasping for air. She panicked and called for help, but it was too late. By the time Jimi reached St. Mary Abbott's Hospital, he was already gone. The autopsy revealed the tragic truth. Jimi Hendrix died from asphyxiation, the result of taking too many sleeping pills mixed with alcohol. Just like that, the most electrifying guitarist the world had ever seen was silenced, at only 27 years old. No farewell tour. No final song. Just an unfinished story, cut short in the middle of a masterpiece. His death didn't just shake the music world, it broke it. Hendrix had only scratched the surface of his genius, and still, what he left behind was enough to inspire generations. He died with his star still rising, but his legacy? Eternal. Gerald Levert, the golden voice that left too soon. Gerald Levert wasn't just an R&B singer, he was the sound of a generation. With chart-topping hits like Casanova and Baby Hold On To Me, his smooth, soulful voice wrapped itself around the hearts of millions. He was charisma, passion, and power rolled into one. But behind the music, behind the fame and the bright stage lights, Gerald was quietly fighting a battle that no one truly saw coming. On November 10, 2006, the world was blindsided. Gerald was found unresponsive in his bed at his home in Ohio, gone without warning. Just the night before, he had mentioned to his family that he was feeling tightness in his chest and struggling to breathe. But he hadn't gone to the hospital. By morning, it was too late. His loved ones found him lifeless, and despite desperate efforts from emergency responders, there was nothing they could do. The final medical report revealed the heartbreaking truth. Gerald died from acute respiratory failure brought on by an accidental overdose of prescription painkillers, medications he had been taking for years to manage chronic pain. Pain that never made the headlines. Pain he sang through, smiled through, and performed through. His death sent shockwaves through the music world. Fans were devastated. An entire genre mourned. Gerald wasn't just another singer, he was the voice. A soulful powerhouse who still had so much more to give. And just like that, at the peak of his talent, he was gone, leaving behind not just timeless music, but a haunting silence where his voice used to soar. Even now, his songs echo through time, but so does the sorrow. Gerald Levert's legacy is one of brilliance, passion, and a farewell far too soon. Old Dirty Bastard. A tornado of talent, silenced too soon. Old Dirty Bastard wasn't just a rapper, he was a force of nature. The wild card of the Wu-Tang Clan, ODB was raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically himself. His unpredictable energy, off-the-wall rhymes, and rebellious spirit made him a legend in hip-hop. But behind the chaos and charisma was a fragile soul, a man battling demons in the shadows while captivating the world with his genius. On November 13, 2004, just 2 days shy of his 36th birthday, the storm came to a sudden, heartbreaking end. While working in a New York recording studio, ODB collapsed without warning. Witnesses said he looked drained, struggled to breathe, and mumbled incoherently before slipping into unconsciousness. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Dirty Bastard was gone. The official cause? Acute heart failure, worsened by a dangerous mix of substances that took an irreversible toll on his body. But to his fans, it felt like something more, like the soul of hip-hop had just lost one of its brightest, wildest flames. His death sent shockwaves through the music world. ODB wasn't just a rapper, he was a cultural phenomenon. His art, his madness, his authenticity redefined what it meant to be real in an industry that often demands masks. Even in controversy, he stayed true to himself. Though his life was messy, loud, and often chaotic, his influence remains undeniable. He changed the game, broke the rules, and inspired a generation. And when he left a hole not just in the Wu-Tang Clan, but in the heart of hip-hop itself. A tragic reminder of how fame and inner battles too often collide. DMX, the warrior who fought until his final breath. DMX wasn't just a rapper, he was a force of nature. With his gravelly voice, raw emotion, and anthems like Rough Riders Anthem and X-Gon, Give It To Ya, he didn't just make music, he shook the streets. But behind the fame and ferocity was a man waging a lifelong war with demons the world couldn't see. Addiction. Trauma. The same fire that fueled his music often burned within. On April 2, 2021, that battle came to a tragic head. DMX collapsed at his home in New York after reportedly ingesting a substance that overwhelmed his body. When his family found him, he had no pulse. His heart had stopped. Paramedics raced him to White Plains Hospital, where doctors discovered devastating news. His brain had been starved of oxygen for too long. He never woke up. For 7 long days, fans held their breath, praying for a miracle. But on April 9th, at just 50 years old, DMX passed away. A titan of hip-hop silenced. A voice that once roared across generations was gone. His death shattered hearts across the globe. He was more than music. He was a symbol of survival, of raw, unfiltered truth. DMX poured his soul into every lyric, revealing a man torn between darkness and redemption. Fans believed in his comeback, hoped to see him rise once more, but fate had other plans. Though his battle ended in heartbreak, his legacy lives on, not just in tracks that still shake the walls, but in the stories he told, the pain he revealed, and the strength he showed just by surviving as long as he did. DMX didn't go quietly. He went out as he lived, fighting. Michael K. Williams. A brilliant flame gone too soon. Michael K. Williams wasn't just an actor, he was a force. A rare talent who breathed life into every character he touched, most famously as the unforgettable Omar Little in The Wire. But behind the powerful performances and piercing gaze was a man quietly waging war against his own demons. On September 6, 2021, that silent battle came to a heartbreaking end. Michael was found lifeless in his Brooklyn apartment. The television still glowing, one of his favorite shows still playing, as if the world hadn't noticed he was gone. There were no signs of struggle, no cries for help, just a haunting stillness, the kind that follows a long, exhausting fight. Near him, subtle traces of the pain he had carried for years. The official cause, an accidental overdose. But the truth ran deeper. Michael's passing wasn't just a tragedy, it was a quiet scream, a reminder of the invisible weight so many carry in silence. Hollywood lost one of its brightest lights that day. But the legacy he leaves behind, raw, honest, and unforgettable, continues to echo through every scene he ever graced. Michael K. Williams didn't just perform. He felt. And through that feeling, he helped the world see the beauty and the burden of being human. Pimp C, the Southern King silenced too soon. Pimp C wasn't just a rapper, he was a force. As one half of UGK, he helped shape the sound of Southern hip-hop with a raw blend of street truth and bluesy soul that could rattle your speakers and stir your spirit. But behind the bravado, the beats, and that unmistakable Texas drawl, a storm was brewing, one that would take him from the world far too soon. On December 4, 2007, the hip-hop world was shaken. Pimp C was found lifeless in his Los Angeles hotel room. He looked peaceful, almost like he was just napping, but he was gone. Hours had passed before anyone realized the underground legend had slipped away in silence. The official cause, respiratory failure, triggered by a deadly cocktail of codeine, a substance he'd long struggled with, and a serious case of sleep apnea. His body was already fighting an uphill battle, and that night, it simply couldn't hold on. There was no warning, no dramatic scene, just a quiet end for a man whose voice had thundered through the speakers of a generation. To those closest to him, his passing wasn't entirely unexpected. They knew the battles he fought behind the fame, the habits, the pain, the quiet cries behind the larger-than-life image. But even still, nothing could dull the shock when the news broke. The South lost a king. Hip-hop lost a poet. And fans across the globe lost a voice that spoke to their soul. Pimp C was only 33, but his legacy stretches far beyond those years. His influence is still felt in every beat that echoes with Southern pride, every rhyme that dares to speak the truth. He may be gone, but his spirit, gritty, soulful, unapologetic, will never fade. Heavy D, the gentle giant taken too soon. Heavy D wasn't just a rapper, he was a movement. A joyful, upbeat force in hip-hop, known for infectious hits like Now That We Found Love and his ability to make crowds move while still keeping his lyrics clean and uplifting. In the 90s, he helped shape a new wave of hip-hop, one filled with charm, rhythm, and heart. But on November 8, 2011, the music world was rocked by a silence no one saw coming. After a long flight from London back to California, Heavy D returned home feeling tired and short of breath. He brushed it off as jet lag, just another travel hangover from life on the road. But fate had other plans. Hours later, as he stood at his front door, he suddenly collapsed. No warning, no time. Just a quiet fall that could have gone unnoticed, if not for a watchful neighbor who rushed to call for help. Paramedics found him conscious, but barely. His body was already shutting down. Heavy D was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where doctors did all they could. But within the hour, the news hit: Heavy D was gone. Just 44 years old. The cause? A pulmonary embolism, a deadly blood clot that blocked the flow to his lungs. It was later believed that medication he was taking for inflammation may have worsened the condition. One minute he was here, the next, a light had gone out in hip-hop. His passing was more than a personal loss. It was a wake-up call. A reminder that even giants can fall. That health often takes a back seat in the music world, until it's too late. Heavy D left behind more than just songs. He left a legacy of positivity, talent, and joy, and a painful reminder of how quickly it can all vanish. Charlie Parker, the brilliant flame that burned too fast. Charlie Parker, known simply as Bird, wasn't just a jazz musician. He was a force of nature, a genius who redefined sound itself and gave birth to bebop, changing the course of music forever. But behind the breathtaking solos and revolutionary notes was a man quietly unraveling. His life wasn't a fairy tale, it was a storm, and it ended far too soon. On March 12, 1955, Bird took his final breath on a worn-out sofa at the Stanhope Hotel in New York City. He was staying in the apartment of Baroness Panonica de Koenigswarter, his loyal friend and patron of the jazz world. When they found him, Charlie was unresponsive, locked in a coma that would soon claim his life. The coroner, looking at his frail, ravaged body, guessed he was over 50. He was just 34. Years of relentless touring, substance abuse, and untreated illness had taken their toll. Pneumonia and heart failure were the official causes of death, but the truth was deeper. His body had simply given up after years of pain, addiction, and exhaustion. In his final days, he was weak, coughing constantly, his brilliant flame flickering in the wind. For those who knew the demons Charlie battled, his death wasn't a surprise. But it was a heartbreak. He died young, with songs still inside him, notes never played, stages never graced. Yet even in death, Bird soared. His influence still echoes through every saxophone, every improvisation, every soul that's ever been touched by jazz. Charlie Parker didn't just play music, he became it. And though the man is gone, the genius will never fade. Billie Holiday. A voice the world loved, a soul the world abandoned. Billie Holiday. The name alone echoes through time like a mournful melody. One of the greatest jazz vocalists to ever live, her voice bled pain, power, and beauty. Songs like Strange Fruit didn't just entertain, they pierced the soul, exposing the brutal truth of racism in America. But behind that iconic voice was a woman battered by life, betrayed by the very world that praised her. On July 17, 1959, Billie took her final breath in a sterile New York hospital room, alone and fading. She was just 44. Decades of trauma, addiction, and illness had ravaged her body. She had been admitted for liver failure, but instead of care, she was met with cruelty. Authorities stormed her hospital room after finding a small packet of narcotics, and without compassion, they handcuffed her to the bed and placed her under armed guard. They stripped her of dignity. They cut off the treatment she desperately needed. As her body gave out, Billie's breath grew shallow, her eyes drifting to a place far beyond the room. No family, no friends, just cold walls and silent watchers. The world watched her die with the same apathy it had shown her for years. And yet, even in death, she refused to be silenced. Billie Holiday's voice lives on, a ghost that still haunts jazz clubs, radio waves, and broken hearts. Her music carries the weight of injustice, sorrow, and resilience. She may have died in chains, but her legacy broke them. Generation after generation continues to find healing, truth, and beauty in her songs. Billie's body may have been buried in loneliness, but her soul rises every time her music plays, eternal, defiant, unforgettable. Little Willie John, the soul legend who died behind bars. Little Willie John was more than just a voice. He was a soul music pioneer whose raw emotion and unforgettable hit, Fever, helped lay the foundation for R&B as we know it. But behind that powerful voice was a storm he couldn't outrun. By the time he was just 30 years old, his light had dimmed behind cold prison walls. On May 26, 1968, the music world lost Little Willie John under tragic and mysterious circumstances. Locked away in a Washington prison, he died serving time, the official cause listed as pneumonia. But whispers followed. Rumors swirled of declining health, harsh prison conditions, and even mistreatment. Some who knew him doubted the story they were given. The truth? Still unclear. Years of inner battles, poor health, and a justice system that seemed to swallow him whole had taken their toll. The vibrant young star who once lit up the stage had become a shadow of himself. His death wasn't just sudden. It was quiet, strange, and filled with questions that never got answers. At just 30, his life ended in isolation. No encore. No grand farewell. Just silence. But Little Willie John's voice refuses to fade. His legacy still echoes in every soulful note sung by those he inspired. Though the world turned its back on him in the end, fans never forgot the passion, the pain, and the power he brought to music. His story remains a haunting reminder of how fame, when tangled with demons and misfortune, can end not in glory, but behind locked doors. Ray Charles, the soul legend who battled demons and still soared. Ray Charles wasn't just a musician, he was a force of nature. With a voice that could melt hearts and a piano that spoke for the soul, he gave the world classics like Georgia on My Mind and Hit the Road Jack. But behind the brilliance and the fame was a lifelong battle with addiction that nearly cost him everything. By the time Ray took his final breath on June 10, 2004, in his Beverly Hills home, the world had already felt the weight of his journey, not just as a legend, but as a man who had faced his demons and fought to reclaim his life. Though he conquered his heroin addiction in 1965, the years of substance abuse had already left their mark. Chronic liver disease would eventually bring him down, a quiet reminder of the war he had once waged within. In his final years, Ray's health declined sharply. Yet, he faced the end with the same quiet dignity that defined his life. A man who had endured blindness, addiction, heartbreak, and fame, and still rose above it all. At 73, Ray Charles passed away, and the music world fell into collective mourning. But his story is more than a tragedy, it's a testament. A story of pain, perseverance, and power. He showed us that even broken wings can fly. That even through darkness, the soul can sing. Ray Charles left behind more than music. He left a legacy of resilience. A reminder that true greatness isn't just about talent, it's about triumph. Marvin Cease, the untamed voice that faded too soon. Marvin Cease, the bold, unapologetic king of dirty blues, was more than just a singer. He was a storm on stage, a charismatic force whose raw, electrifying style set him apart in the world of Southern R&B. But even the wildest storms eventually quiet. On February 8, 2011, the voice that once shook concert halls fell silent. Marvin Cease passed away at his home in Vicksburg, Mississippi, after a brutal battle with pneumonia. In the weeks leading up to his death, Marvin's health had taken a sharp and heartbreaking turn. The once mighty voice that defined a generation had grown faint. He canceled shows he could no longer power through, his energy drained, his body failing. Family members revealed that he suffered from a relentless cough and struggled to breathe. Yet, tragically, he never received the urgent care he needed. The official cause was listed as complications from pneumonia. But to those who knew him, who followed his rise and chaos-filled path, there was more beneath the surface. Years of personal battles, heartbreaks, hardships, and rumors of substance abuse may have quietly worn down his body. Some speculated that a past riddled with cocaine use had weakened his immune system, leaving him vulnerable and unprotected in the end. Still, no amount of speculation can erase what Marvin left behind. A legacy steeped in soul, fire, and fearless expression. His death carved a painful hole in the heart of Southern R&B. Where his voice once roared, there is now only silence. But in every sultry lyric and every unforgettable performance, Marvin Cease lives on, a legend who refused to be tamed. Dinah Washington, the blues queen silenced too soon. Dinah Washington, the unforgettable queen of blues and jazz. Her voice could shatter hearts and soothe souls in the same breath, immortalized in classics like What a Difference a Day Makes and Unforgettable. But not even royalty is safe from tragedy. On December 14, 1963, Dinah was found lifeless in her Detroit home. The soft glow of a bedside lamp still flickered as if time had paused in quiet mourning. Her husband made the heartbreaking discovery: the queen had passed in her sleep, leaving behind a still room and an unfinished legacy. The night before, Dinah had taken a dangerous mix, alcohol and prescription stimulants, a combination many use to curb appetite and stay energized. But for Dinah, whose heart had endured years of emotional and physical stress, it was fatal. Few around her knew just how fragile she'd become behind that powerhouse voice. She was only 39. Just like that, the music world lost one of its brightest flames. Her voice, that rich, soul-soaked sound that helped define an era, was gone. But her spirit never faded. Dinah's voice still echoes across generations, timeless and full of life, refusing to be forgotten. Her sudden death was more than just a personal tragedy, it was a reminder of how fame can both elevate and consume. Behind the glamour was a woman struggling, enduring, and ultimately silenced too soon. We've just walked through the haunting stories of 21 stars whose lights burned brightly but were extinguished by the weight of fame. Which of these stories shook you the most? Which passing left a permanent ache in your heart? Let us know in the comments, and stay with us as we peel back the curtain on Hollywood's darkest truths, a world where beauty and brilliance often come at an unbearable cost. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because the truth behind the fame deserves to be told.